Tell us a little about yourself and what motivated you to run for office.
Well, I was born and raised here in Kansas City, born at St. Luke's Hospital. My wife said I was born to shop on the plaza, so I don't know if that's true or not. But so I've lived in South Kansas City. I've lived in Grandview many years ago, lived in Belton, and 20 years ago I moved to Lee Summit, and it's been by far the best place we've ever lived. And now I have 7 grandchildren, 2 daughters, 2 sons-in-law, and 7 grandchildren who all live in Lee Summit. And so for me, this is really a legacy play. This is, I've done what I wanted to do as far as my life is concerned, and traveled and been to the places I want to be to, and accomplished the goals I wanted to do. Now I'm interested in thinking about the legacy I'll leave 20 years from now for my grandkids. What will this city look like? It's been wonderful for me for the last 20 years. I want it to be wonderful for them for the next 20.
Okay. How will you balance serving your district with your service to our city?
Well, I think, the city, first of all, takes precedence because we're all in this together. We've all got skin in the same game. But I want to be able to represent my district, which is a diverse district, as you know. I mean, it ranges from Raintree to the new set of apartments there on 150 Highway, all the way up into some of the older sections of town, and half the south side of 3rd Street, a good portion of downtown. So the specific interest of those individual constituents, I think, is critically important. But in the end, sometimes we have to do what's best for the city as a whole.
Okay. The city charter clearly defines the relationship between city council and city staff. Please describe how you envision your working relationship with city staff.
Well, never having served on a city council, that part of that remains to be seen. But my job, as I told the firefighters and the police department the other day, is to find out what can I do to make your job better, because in the end, the frontline faces that most people encounter are not the council members, but rather the people when they go in to pay taxes, go into the office. And I have to say, just as a complete aside, I've had nothing but remarkable experiences. This is so not like the DMV. This is, every time I've had an encounter with a city employee, they've been absolutely exemplary. They've been courteous, helpful, prompt. How else can I help you? Thank you so much for coming by. And so since that's the first line of encounter for most citizens, I think it's important for me to figure out how to help them do their jobs more efficiently. The council and the mayor's office shape the policy, but the city employees are the ones who actually enact those policies, whether it's Parks and Rec or Fire Department or whatever.
Okay. What do you consider major challenges and priorities for the city of Lee Summit, and how would you address?
I'm glad you asked. Everything that I'm wanting to do, the name of your organization mimics it, I think. I'm thinking about the foundation for our future. Lee Summit has a remarkable history. 150 years, we've grown from 100 people to 100,000 people. It's gone from a sleepy little country town to a major metropolitan area. If you happen to look at what portion of the Democratic caucuses have come in from last night, you know that Pete Buttigieg, or however he pronounces that, is the leader, and he's the mayor of it. His credentials for running for president of the United States is that he's a mayor of a town scarcely larger than Lee Summit. This is a big city now. This is not a small town. But it's been developed by good, common sense Missouri folks, farmers, citizens, teachers. And my concern is that at every level of government, as I look around today, something dramatically has changed in the last 15 years, 20 years, and it's changing even more rapidly now. That change is accelerating. Because now there are lots of outside influences at work. There's big money, there are big organizations, there are county, state, federal agencies that seek to influence the shape of our city, what it ought to look like rather than what it does look like. And my concern is that we're the ones with stakes in the game. We're the ones with skin in the game. We have the most to lose as citizens. We have the most to gain. And so I'm concerned that with PRI property coming onto the market, there's lots of development that's going to be happening, and we're rapidly moving towards a city that's a maintenance city and not a growing city. The day will come before my grandkids are that much older over the next 20 years. And I want to make sure that we don't write any checks as a city that my grandkids can't cash.
Okay. Do you believe economic development should be a primary focus of City Council? Why or why not?
Absolutely, I believe it should. I mean, I think that Lee Summit is a lovely town to live in. I want to see more commercial property, light industrial, more job opportunities so that our people don't have to drive across 470 all the way to Johnson County twice a day, so they don't have to drive to Kansas City downtown twice a day. I'd like them to find jobs, good paying jobs, professional jobs, situations like a Corporate Woods, for example, right here in Lee Summit. There's going to be lots of development opportunities along Colburn Road between Unity and the airport. Lots and lots of opportunities for wise, measured, thoughtful growth. But we have to do it in light of what can we sustain, what can we support 10 years from now, and not destroy the place that we've all come to love just purely for the sake of economic development. But it has to be one of the key concerns that we all share, is that we do it and we do it right.
Okay. Does the current economic development incentive policy provide appropriate tools for sustainable growth?
I like what I've read. I haven't read there's a tremendous, to the credit of the city, a tremendous amount of information to be found on the website. Somebody could lose several weeks of their lives just trying to read through all the information that's there. And then you go to the C4 and the Ignite program and you start reading through those. There's lots of plans and lots of thoughts that have gone into this. And I think, I attended a meeting a couple of weeks ago as part of C4 about residential development in the city. And it was eye-opening. It was interesting to hear what Mid-America Regional Council and others had to say about what they thought our city should become in terms of inclusivity and diversity. We certainly need to be an inclusive city. We need diversity in our community. We need to do it on our terms, not on anybody else's terms, and incentives are a viable way to do that, managed wisely. What we don't want is to create areas that will be blighted 15 years from now because we've created a high-density situation that we can't sustain. They're all beautiful. I mean, I love all the growth and things that I'm seeing, the apartments there on 150, the apartments over by Longview Farm, the apartments up on Colburn Road. They're beautiful. I've not toured any of them, but I've looked online, looked at the floor plans. But I want to make sure that they stay nice. And if we're using economic incentives to bring in different economic stratus into this city, I think that's a healthy thing. But I think we need to do it with wisdom.
Okay. When would economic incentives and enhancements be appropriate?
Well, I would be a little presumptuous to try to answer that question at this moment in my life because, I'm just moving toward the opportunity to serve in a leadership role for the city. But in general, I think they're particularly attractive if we can use them to develop commercial interest, more so than residential. I think that that's what our goal ought to be. We're growing residentially. There's lots of developers here. There's lots of property coming online. We're growing residentially without a whole lot of incentives unless you want to use some set-asides or something for changing the structure of the citizen, the community. But I think personally, I think that things like a TIF would be wise to use in commercial developments. I mean, the one over at Summit's paid off, 14 years, paid off early. It was a great deal. Hats off to the people that structured that deal. It was good for all of us.
Okay. How does Lee Summit continue to become the place to live, work, and play?
Back to that commercial development. We got play, and we've got live, and we now have a diversity of living opportunities. Young people today, I don't understand them at my age, but I'm looking around to see if there's anybody under 30 in the room. A few of you ladies are under 30, but most of us aren't. Kids today aren't looking for the 4,400 square foot house and the half-acre yard. They're looking for different things in housing than we were looking for, and so I think we need to continue to evaluate the needs of the community and the needs of the people who live and work here. So finding opportunities to build commercial and light industrial here for good-paying, quality jobs for the citizens of Lee Summit, for our kids and our grandkids, and housing that meets the changing needs of a changing population.
Okay. Cooperation, diplomacy, and mutual respect are necessary to ensure the appropriate process established by our charter and existing ordinances. What leadership experience do you have that has helped you prepare for the level of professionalism required of council members?
I started out, well, I'll tell you one of the things that's obscure, that's from my generation, not from the kids' generation today, but I think it's important. I was an Eagle Scout. My son is an Eagle Scout. My grandson becomes an Eagle Scout next month. And all of those were leadership opportunities at an early age. Then, right out of college, I was hired by a prehistoric, primitive version of a computer company to sell computers. And we had 1,300 salesmen, and over the next 5 years, for the last two, my fourth and fifth year in that industry, I was the number one salesman in the United States out of 1,300 because I developed a relationship with H&R Block here in Kansas City and serviced their accounts nationwide, and in fact, globally. I serviced their accounts in the Philippines and Japan, all over the place. And it was my professionalism that convinced them to leave a supplier that they'd been with for many, many years and turn their business over to my company. I've also served as president of a Kiwanis Club in Overland Park for 2 years, founded it, in fact, back in like 1980, 81. Kiwanis at that time, I don't know what it's like today, but at that time Kiwanis was typically, the average age was probably 70, and a major fundraising project for them would be $400 or getting some used eyeglasses to donate, which is a lovely thing. But I came in and recruited a bunch of young professionals from the Corporate Woods area, which is where I was working at the time as an investment broker. And we put together a large club that in our first year raised, I think, $27,000 for Kansas Special Olympics. We did a celebrity sports banquet. We brought in George Brett. We brought in Harold Inslee, the sportsman's friend, a bunch of TV personalities. We auctioned off an automobile, did a lot of interesting things. And then they asked me to be president again the following year. And that was a great opportunity to, we were written up nationally for like the biggest fundraising events in the history of Kiwanis or something, which we all kind of thought was amusing because it wasn't that big a deal to us. But I've been a pastor, and that requires the ultimate self-sacrifice to try to become all things to all men and be available at 3 in the morning when the phone rings and the police, I remember one call, police saying, "Do you know so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." Said, "She left your name on a note, and she said she's committing suicide tonight. Do you have any idea where she is?" And so you have some significant people responsibilities. Nothing is probably more difficult to manage than a church because everybody's got their own little infighting angles, as some of you who've ever been a part of church leadership know. And finally, I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20-some-odd years. I own my own company, founded in 1994. We're in our 26th year. I've got a number of paid staff and a number of volunteer staff, and they're spread out all over the United States, and I travel around the country as a speaker. I've done probably over 1,000 workshops in the last 26 years, probably spoken to, I don't know, maybe 1 million people more, I don't know. I mean, I've been in workshops of several thousand in which you have to be in tuned and attentive to the diverse needs there. Because you get a group that big and there's all kinds of different needs. And what they're looking for, frankly, and what I think every organization is looking for, is somebody to just step up and say, "Here's a plan." I always told my kids growing up, I said, "You know what the difference between a leader and a follower is? A leader steps up and goes, 'I got an idea. What do you think?' And everybody's going, 'Good, I was hoping somebody had a plan. Tell us your idea.'" And so I've had that track record of being able to evaluate information, propose a viable solution to a diverse community of people in any organization, and usually it's adopted.
Okay.
That was too long an answer to too
No, you're
simple a
good.
question,
You're
but
good. So what's Lee Summit's role in supporting and contributing to the cultural arts?
I'm not an arts guy, but I love what I see in Lee Summit. I mean, I love what's happened in downtown. I love the Christmas lights. I love all the little galleries and independent artists and shops and photographers and videographers that have popped up in Lee Summit. That would, I hope, not ever be my charge as a committee, because that's not who I am particularly, but I think it's important. I'm more into reading and books than I am to some of the fine arts like painting and music. But I think arts, in the end, arts nourish our soul, and they make us all more human in the process. And so in a world of, I don't know, some of you might have watched did anybody watch the State of the Union last night? There's a little lack of civility there on everyone's part, I think, from the president perhaps declining to shake the Speaker of the House's hand to tearing up the speech. And in the world in which we live in, tempers run hot. Social media can inflame something in a matter of hours. You're not even aware of it, and you come home later that day, and it's blown up on social media. And so I think sharing arts as a community and the outdoors, Parks and Rec, bring us together as a community and humanize us so that you realize that your opponent's not your enemy.
Okay. How does Lee Summit maintain and continue to improve its remarkable amenities such as parks, cultural arts, and wide variety of entertainment options?
Well, I'm grateful that that's a standing committee for the city and that they've prioritized that. Like I said, that's not particularly my thing because I'm not an artist or a musician. Somebody said once, a friend of mine said once, Lambert, you're what we call a jailhouse singer. And I said, I'm not familiar with that term. He said, a jailhouse singer is somebody who's always behind a few bars and can't find the key. And I said, oh, okay, I got it. Now I understand, jailhouse singer. So that's not my thing, and I'm sure if I do any paintings for you, they would Rorschach those and probably lock me up and be convinced that I was crazy. But I think prioritizing, the four basics of running a city. I just want my toilet to flush, my water to be clean, like Flint, Michigan, not. The police to show up when I need them, and the fire department to show up when I need them, which I needed not too long ago. I collapsed at home, and the fire department from Station 5 was there within a matter of minutes and did a great job. Turned out I was dehydrated. So I had an IV and was feeling better before I even got to St. Luke's. Those are the four basics. Everything else is the frosting on the cake. So we've got that. It seems like we have that well in hand. I mean, I think anybody can walk into Lee Summit and say, my gosh, you've got a wonderful community. You got top-rated schools throughout the state of Missouri, number 3 rated, I think, in Missouri, number 3 in the metro area. You've got a beautiful, residential development. You've got all those things going, and as a bonus, you've got beautiful parks, recreation. There's green space everywhere, and the arts development, particularly in the downtown redevelopment, which is a model really for the United States. I mean, when I bring guests in from anywhere in the United States, as soon as they've had some barbecue, then the next place I take them is to downtown Lee Summit, and they're like, "Oh my word, I love this! Ours is blighted and run down, and all the buildings are boarded up. How did you do this?" And I said, "A lot of people worked hard to make this happen." So I think those kinds of things are not foundational to developing a city, but they're functionally significant because they, like I said earlier, humanize us and provide an opportunity for us to do more than simply go to work every day.
Okay. Please explain your understanding of workforce development and how we best leverage.
I'm not totally sure I know what you mean by that phrase. As I said earlier, I think we need to develop commercial, light industrial opportunities to bring well-paying, meaningful jobs into Lee Summit. We also need to be aware that as we continue to grow in the retail business, restaurant industry, that we're creating a number of lower-paying jobs, that we need to be sensitive to the needs of that part of our community and think about where do those people live and work. Do we want them all commuting from downtown Kansas City or from Independence or from Raytown? What does that look like? And what are we willing, what price is the city willing to pay to provide good jobs across the spectrum, whether you're earning 6 figures or $6 an hour? Well, nobody's making $6 an hour. I think I started at 50 cents an hour when I went my first job, but what's it, like $11-12 now, something like that.
Okay. What is your vision for the Lee Summit Airport?
It's grown far beyond my vision. I'm totally impressed with what they've done over there, and I understand that there's new zoning to the west of it as well. When they put in that second airport, I kind of sighed a little bit because I was hoping that 1,200 acres of PRI could be like corporate woods, but I don't think they're going to put any 3-4-story buildings up at the end of the east-west runway at this point. But that provides, everything from cultural opportunities like the B-17 flights to becoming an invitation for corporate development, regional centers. Kansas City in general, and Lee Summit in particular, have an incredibly blessed location in the United States. You're 3 hours from anywhere in the United States. You can hop on a plane at 6:30 in the morning, be at a meeting in New York or LA before 10, spend the day there and be home to crawl into your own bed that night. Our geography is an enormous blessing. and not having to go to KCI to do that for upper-level management people, for corporations, I think is a tremendous asset. Very few towns of our size have that kind of an airport. And somebody's done a lot of great work in developing that over the last couple of years. That was a little sleepy. It wasn't a grass field, but it was just a sleepy small-town field when I came here 20 years ago, and now it looks like a significant metropolitan airport.
What would you most like to accomplish during your term?
Well, I said it at the outset. I'd like to help shape the future of this city in a way that it'll be as enjoyable for my grandkids 20 years from now as it has been for me in the last 20 years. And I think that's, honestly, I think that's very much up in the air. In a world where outside influences, I mean, when you have the First Lady of the United States telling local schools what they can serve for lunch, there's no limit to the outside influences and the people who ought to be making those decisions about what our schools teach, when they teach it, what they teach, who they hire, who the superintendent's going to be. There's another whole subject. Where growth is going to take place, how much is single family, how much is residential, how much is set aside, how much is multifamily. All of those issues, I think this city has a remarkable track record for 150 years. We've done it on our own, we've done it well. And I don't want to see strong outside money and strong outside influences coming in and telling us from the West Coast or from Florida, this is what your city ought to look like in terms of municipal development. I think we are the stakeholders in that deal. We have the chips in the game. We stand to gain, we stand to lose. It's up to us to continue to shape our community the way we want our community to be shaped and not be at the mercy of outside influences. So my goal is to see that that happens every time I have a chance so that my kids, when they're our age, sit around this table 20, 30 years from now and are still having great conversations about how can we improve our city instead of how do we try to revive our city, or how do we handle the enormous debt load we've taken on, or how are we ever going to pay for those bonds, or whatever. I want them to have the opportunity you've had.
Okay. Last question. What is your long-term vision for Lee Summit?
Well, at my age, it's wise not to have too many long-term visions. I saw a thing the other day that said it said something like, young people need to be cautious because at our age, life in prison's not that big, a deterrent. But I think, I without going back and repeating it all, I think, like I said, I want to see. Lee Summit is at a critical crossroads, in my opinion. We've been there for the last several years, and the next 10 will largely determine the course of these conversations in the year 2040 when I'm gone. And I don't want them to be saying, sit around going, what do we do about this horrible, blighted, high-density housing project that we approved back in 2020? What do we do about the crime rate? What do we do about, the fact that we've outgrown our water supply or whatever? And so long-term, I'd like to see Lee Summit continue to be the vibrant, living community that it is. This is the American dream. This is the place that everybody wants to be. They want to be in South Johnson County. They want to be here. There's only a handful of places in the metropolitan area that people aspire to come and live in, and this is right at the top, and I want it to continue to be that.
Okay. Well, Steve, you've got about, 7 or 8 minutes left, 10 minutes? Anything else you want to tell us?
Gosh, I've answered a lot of questions tonight. Have you got any other questions? Anybody have any personal questions or that aren't on the main 13?
We can't do that.
Can't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But if there's something you want to go back and add to, or something, anything you want to tell us, the floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate
all
it.
ears.
Like I said, this is when I drive around the city or when I talk to people and meet people here, there are two things that I hear every day, and I guarantee you've heard the same things. Where are all these apartments coming from? And what's this with drive-by shootings and the murder in the car wash, and what's happening in our city? We didn't used to have this kind of crime. Those are the topics that I hear over and over and over. Now, if you actually look at the statistics on crime, well, it's not necessarily what it appears to be, but the reality is we're part of a conjoined metropolitan area of 1.5 million or 2 million people, so we're not isolated. People drive through just like they did in the drive-by shooting from Independence area. You can't control that. I am concerned that out of 75 square miles, that we only have 8 uniformed officers on the street at any given time. I mean, that seems crazy. If you think of a city of 100,000 people, if you think of a Columbia, Missouri, or Springfield, Missouri, they're a little bigger than that. I can't imagine they could operate with only 8 uniformed officers on the street at any given time. So I think we need to think about law enforcement. We need to think about the implications to our city as we develop growth plans and incentives and structures, and do it in a responsible, reasonable way. I mean, we know from past experience that communities like in Nashville have done a wonderful job of integrating even some Section 8 housing, a few set-asides in high-end units, and darned if those people don't suddenly get a sense of pride and community who moved in there, and they're only paying $300 a month, and their next-door neighbor's paying $2,300 a month, but they began to change. Where we're into trouble is when we build a unit, a community that's all subsidized housing, where there's very little pride, and 10 years from now it's blighted and an eyesore and a source of crime. And so I think those are the questions that I hear people in Lee Summit asking over and over and over. It hurts a lot about school superintendents, but that's another story for another day, not my situation. I've committed the last 26 years of my life basically talking to parents about raising their kids. And my ultimate final conviction is that the best form of government is self-government. I mean, if we could all just control ourselves, we wouldn't need any police. We wouldn't need the courts. We wouldn't need anything if we all just could control ourselves. I think your kindergarten or first grade teacher, they used to, when I was in kindergarten or first grade back in the last century, way back in the last century, they said, control your members. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I think they meant your hands. Keep your hands and feet to yourself. Control your members. If we could do that, then we don't need any additional outside form of government. Beyond that, the next level of interest is my family and my household, my extended family, my neighborhood, my community, my homeowners association, then my city, and finally my county, state, and federal government. And I guess now we need to be concerned about the international government and O2 emissions and CO2 emissions and so forth. But I want and would work hard to make sure that we do as much self-governing as possible in this community, because I think it's an exemplary. I mean, this is a showplace on a national scale. I mean, every city in the country would like to have what we have in terms of housing, median property values, income, development, commercial development, revitalized downtown. But I think the stakeholders are the ones that ought to be making those decisions and not outside forces, because we're becoming, basically the bigger the government becomes, the less say that we have. And I think that's dangerous for a community like Lee Summit that's done a great job of self-management for 150 years. Okay. I guess that's the thought I would leave you with.